The handshake that broke Hogwarts, rewriting Harry's first choice. What if the boy who lived didn't pull his hand away? What if, in a cramped robe shop in Diagon Alley, Harry Potter accepted Draco Malfoy's very first offer of friendship? Today, we deconstruct a timeline that fractures on a single, quiet touch. Madame Malkin's pins bite Harry's hem. The air smells of dust and new fabric. Draco's hand extends, pale, confident, wrapped in the casual arrogance of generations. And this time, Harry doesn't hesitate. Fingers meet, robes brush. There is the faint rasp of skin on skin and the almost inaudible click of history changing its track. The turning point arrives, not with a prophecy, but with a handshake. In the original series, that moment is a near miss, a warning flare before the real story begins on the Hogwarts Express with a lanky red-haired boy and a pile of sandwiches. Here, the core issue is mechanical. Before Harry ever sees the Scarlet Steam Engine, the social machinery of pureblood power has already closed around him. Draco is no longer an obnoxious stranger he rejects. He is the first wizard boy to treat Harry as an equal, to say, in effect, "You belong with us." Imagine the psychological reality for an abused child who has never been chosen for anything. In this version of the timeline, Harry steps onto platform 9 3/4, not as a lost outsider scanning the crowd for kindness, but as a guest of the Malfoys, flanked by trunks handled by house elves and guided by Lucius's thin, appraising smile. The subtext is brutal. Before Hogwarts can claim Harry Potter, Slytherin expectations already have. So we arrive at the central question. If Harry Potter accepts Draco Malfoy's friendship, does he become a weapon sharpened for pureblood supremacy, or the first truly heroic Slytherin in modern Hogwarts history? Is this the origin story of Dark Harry, polished at Malfoy Manor dinners and steered toward the Ministry, or of a boy who walks into the snake pit and quietly rewires its loyalties from the inside? The emotional stakes escalate immediately. That small movement of his hand doesn't just shift where he sits on the train, it threatens to structurally annihilate the entire Golden Trio dynamic. There is no awkward sandwich trade with Ron, no instant bond over hand-me-down robes. Hermione, arriving later, doesn't find a lonely Gryffindor boy in need of homework help. She finds a famous Slytherin first year already orbiting Malfoy. Hagrid's gruff trust curdles into unease. Even Dumbledore's quiet faith in Harry becomes a calculation. Has the child of prophecy already been compromised? From here, the ripples are relentless. The Sorting Hat's hesitation between Gryffindor and Slytherin is no longer an internal struggle. It is a foregone conclusion, reinforced by Draco's presence at the table. The divergence is finalized in green and silver. That altered house badge will rewire the protections around the Philosopher's Stone, the alliances in the Chamber of Secrets, the custody of Sirius Black, and the very architecture of Voldemort's final war. Who betrays whom, who survives, and who stands on which side of the battlefield when the wands are raised. In the next section, we follow that handshake onto the Hogwarts Express, and watch, compartment by compartment, as the new power structure of Harry's first year locks into place. From cupboard to drawing room, rewiring Harry before Hogwarts. But before we follow that handshake onto the train, we have to go back to the cupboard. What kind of child reaches for Draco Malfoy's hand and thinks salvation, not threat? What fracture has to exist long before Hogwarts for that polished arrogance to read as safety? To answer that, we deconstruct a timeline that usually rushes past Privet Drive as background noise. In canon, Harry's resistance to Draco is instinctive. He has an almost animal distrust of people who look down on others. Yet that instinct is not genetic. It is learned through a decade of being the one who is looked down on. The Dursleys do not simply neglect him, they weaponize hierarchy. Dudley is praised, overfed, and expanded to fill every room, while Harry is literally compressed into a cupboard under the stairs. Every birthday party Harry cooks for and does not attend, every school photo where Dudley grins and Harry stands off to the side in secondhand gray reinforces a single psychological message: you are beneath everyone. The subtext is brutal. Harry is not only starved of affection, he is starved of status. Vernon's work dinners, Petunia's obsession with the best primary school, the constant commentary about neighbors and promotions create a domestic universe where social climbing is the only real magic they believe in. Harry watches them polish Dudley for that world. New uniforms, new television, new diet when needed. He watches, and he learns that power is not about kindness. It is about who gets the bigger bedroom. In the original reality, that training backfires. Harry's empathy, his loyalty to those at the bottom, makes him bristle when Draco insults Ron before the sorting. But the core issue is mechanical. Change the angle of exposure, and the same trauma can drive a different conclusion. Imagine a timeline where the Dursleys' social performance becomes even more frantic, where Vernon's job is under threat, where appearances become a survival strategy. Harry is dragged to more company functions, more school gates, more moments where he is ordered to be invisible, while Dudley is displayed. He internalizes not just that he is unwanted, but that the only way out is to become the kind of person the Dursleys worship. Enter Draco Malfoy on a gleaming platform that already feels impossibly far from the cupboard. Draco's posture, his clothes, the casual way he name-drops the right sort of families. This is the living embodiment of everything Vernon and Petunia have chased and denied Harry access to. When Draco extends his hand, the gesture is not abstract. It is a concrete offer of elevation. For a child who has never once been treated as an equal, the symmetry of a handshake is intoxicating. Psychologically, that moment is about identity capture. Draco is not just offering friendship, he is offering a prepackaged self. Pure-blood culture, old names, inherited money, the quiet power of being a Malfoy ally in every corridor. This functions as an alternate family structure. Harry's only model of family so far is the Dursleys' cruelty, where affection is conditional and hierarchy absolute. The idea that there exists a world in which he could belong at the top of that hierarchy rather than under the stairs is not merely tempting, it is a complete rewrite of reality, and this is where the turning point arrives. When Draco's hand is outstretched, Harry is not just choosing between Malfoy and Weasley, or Slytherin and Gryffindor. He is choosing between remaining the boy at the bottom of every ladder and seizing the first credible promise that he will never be there again. The divergence is finalized not in the grandeur of Hogwarts, but in the quiet, desperate logic of a child who has spent 10 years in the dark. So the question shifts. It is no longer, why would Harry accept Draco's hand? After a decade in the cupboard, watching status used as a weapon against him, the real question is, how could he possibly refuse the first hand that promises he will never be the one under the stairs again? In the next section, we watch what happens when that decision follows him into the Hogwarts Express compartment, and the new power structure of his first year begins to harden into destiny. The train that never meets Ron, a new Hogwarts Express. The train is where the fracture becomes visible. The platform is the same smoke, the same owls, the same frantic Weasley chaos somewhere in the background, but Harry's trajectory has already shifted. He is not scanning for a large family with red hair. He is scanning for one boy who made him feel, for the first time, chosen. Draco finds him on purpose. That is the first mechanical change. In canon, the corridor meeting is casual, almost accidental. Here, Draco Malfoy, who has already tested the waters at Madame Malkin's, has a mission. He moves through the express with the confidence of inherited power, slides open compartment doors, and when he sees Harry alone with Hedwig's cage, he does not introduce himself. He reclaims him. "Potter, there you are. Come on, I've saved us a place." The core issue is mechanical placement. Draco is not merely offering friendship, he is curating Harry's environment. He steers him past the compartment where Ron is still wrestling with his trunk, past the moment where a shy hand-me-down boy might have asked, "Excuse me, is anyone sitting there?" Instead, Harry is guided into a compartment already occupied by Crabbe and Goyle, already saturated with Slytherin expectation. The door closes. The divergence is finalized. What does Harry lose in that sliding door of a corridor? No shared corned beef sandwiches, no mutual complaints about embarrassed mothers and second-hand robes, no instant recognition of another child who has been socially sidelined. In the original timeline, that lunch is a psychological reset. Harry experiences an equal for the first time, someone who is impressed and awkward and poor. Here, his first peer interaction is with heirs who treat him as an asset, not a partner. The subtext is brutal. He is valuable, but not necessarily valued. Draco begins to explain the world. Houses are not moral categories, they are brands. Gryffindor is for show-offs, Hufflepuff for duffers, Ravenclaw for swats, and Slytherin for people who matter. Blood status is not a debate, it is a hierarchy presented as reality. He mentions the Malfoy seat on the Board of Governors, Lucius's influence at the Ministry, the way power flows through old families and old names. For a boy who has been starved of information, this torrent feels authoritative. When Draco says, "With your history, you'd be wasted anywhere but Slytherin," Harry hears destiny, not propaganda. Then, the pattern interrupt arrives in a bushy-haired package. Hermione Granger still appears at the door, breathless, asking about a toad, but the dynamic is inverted. She is not barging into a compartment of misfits. She is intruding on a pureblood seminar. Crabbe snickers, Goyle looms. Draco's disdain sharpens for an audience. Harry, flanked by this new structure, does not see a potential friend. He sees a social breach. Her efficient spellwork and rapid-fire facts do not read as endearing competence. They read as aggression in a space he has been told is his. By the time the boats glide across the Black Lake, the new hierarchy has hardened. Hagrid's lantern swings. His wave is genuine, a reminder of the first adult who ever rescued Harry, but now there is a pale hand on the side of Harry's boat, a quiet, confident smirk that promises protection, access, and a seat among the powerful. As the castle looms and the water reflects its jagged silhouette, Harry is already imagining himself descending, not ascending, stone corridors, green light, the murmur of Slytherin House rising to greet its newest prize. When the Sorting Hat drops over his eyes, the question will not be, not Slytherin, not Slytherin. It will be, why would he say no? And that single missing protest will rewire the war. The Sorting Hat's second chance. Slytherin claims the boy who lived. When the hat falls, the hall disappears. We remember the canon version, a nervous boy, a frantic plea, a last-second diversion to Gryffindor. But what happens when that plea never forms? When the psychological wiring has already been altered on the train? Today, we deconstruct a timeline where the Sorting Hat is not wrestling Harry Potter away from Slytherin, but gently steering him toward the only place that currently makes sense. Concrete first, then interpretation. Harry walks to the stool under a storm of whispers, the words, "boy who lived," hissing around the rafters like a physical draft. His steps slow as he passes the Gryffindor table. There is no Weasley anchor waving him over, no chocolate frog bond, no prior loyalty. Ron is just another redhead staring. Hermione, bushy-haired and rigid, is already cataloging him as a historical event rather than a future friend. Across the hall, Draco's gaze is different, focused, proprietary. The Slytherin table is a corridor of green and silver expectation, and that expectation functions as a temporary family structure. Harry feels it. After 11 years in a cupboard, being anticipated is its own intoxicating magic. The hat drops. Darkness. Then, a voice that sounds amused and faintly impressed. Ah, again. In canon, the core issue is mechanical. The hat senses ambition and talent, but is overridden by a desperate rejection of Slytherin. Here, the emotional circuitry has been rewired. The hat still tastes the same underlying elements: courage that borders on recklessness, a capacity for love coiled tight around old trauma, a stubborn refusal to abandon others. But layered over, that is something sharper, a new curiosity about power, a fresh imprint of Malfoy mentorship, etiquette tips, names to respect, names to avoid, the quiet promise that pure-blood influence can make unfairness stop. The internal dialogue shifts. The hat probes memories of Dudley's fists, Aunt Marge's contempt, Vernon's bellowing. It sees a boy who has been a victim in every room he has ever entered. Then it feels the new desire humming beneath the fear. Not to be noble, not yet, but to never be powerless again. Harry hesitates, but he does not beg. His thought is smaller, more honest. What would it be to be somewhere I could finally win? The hat answers in its own way. Slytherin is reframed, not as a nest of future Death Eaters, but as a house of survivors and strategists, the ones who refuse to stay on the floor when the world knocks them down. It shows him images, students who bartered, negotiated, and schemed their way out of terrible homes. Children who learned to weaponize reputation so they would not be hurt first. The subtext is brutal. Slytherin, in this framing, is self-defense codified into tradition. For a boy whose entire reality has been reactive, that sounds less like corruption and more like safety. The divergence is finalized with a single word, spoken almost gently: Slytherin. The reaction is immediate and asymmetric. The Slytherin table erupts, chairs scraping, hands slamming the wood, Draco already pushing aside a space as if this outcome had been inevitable. To them, this is not just a victory, it is a weapon acquired. Gryffindor does not boo. That would be too simple. Ron stares, mouth open, watching the boy he failed to befriend sit beside his rival. Hermione's eyes narrow behind her fringe as she recalculates the entire social dynamic of the year in real time. And at the staff table, Dumbledore's applause is a fraction too slow, his gaze measuring, as if unsure whether he has just lost a symbol or gained a volatile new variable. Harry sits. Green banners ripple overhead. For the first time, he is not on the outside of a group looking in. He is inside Slytherin House, and the war will now have to root around that fact. Rebuilding Year 1. Classes, Quidditch, and a Slytherin hero prototype. The feast ends. The real experiment begins. Slytherin does not welcome Harry with roaring warmth. It receives him the way an old pureblood family receives an unexpected heir, politely, watchfully, already calculating the leverage. The common room, viewed through Harry's eyes, is breathtaking. Green-lit water shadows move across the stone ceiling, silver lamps burn low, and the Black Lake presses in at the windows, turning the whole space into a submerged cathedral of ambition. It is beautiful. It is also a closed circuit. Draco becomes both tour guide and border guard. He translates the portrait's muttered Latin, identifies family crests on trunks, and with a small tilt of his head, signals which names matter. The subtext is brutal. Harry absorbs that Muggleborn is a word you lower your voice for, that Weasley is a punchline, that blood is a kind of currency. The core issue is mechanical. If the only people explaining the rules of this reality are Malfoys and their satellites, then the structure of Harry's loyalties is being engineered in real time. Classes harden that dynamic. In potions, Snape's bias is no longer a background irritation, it is weaponized pedagogy. Harry answers a question, Snape's eyes flicker, and 5 points slide to Slytherin. A minor success in class becomes a public confirmation that the boy who lived belongs in green. When Neville melts a cauldron, or Ron fumbles an ingredient, Snape's scorn lands on Gryffindor as a category, not just individual incompetence. Harry, sitting safely at the favored bench, feels the fracture. Those boys on the other side of the dungeon could have been his friends. Instead, they are noisy, red-trimmed reminders of a path not taken. The turning point arrives on the broomsticks. In canon, the Remembrall incident exposes Draco's cruelty and Harry's defiance. Here, it becomes a rehearsal for coordinated power. Draco snatches Neville's Remembrall, but not to provoke Harry, he does it to set the stage. He throws it, confident. Harry chases, not in opposition, but in tandem, executing the same impossible dive, the same one-handed catch. McGonagall still drags him off the field. She still recruits him for Quidditch, only this time, she does it through clenched teeth, because she has just armed Slytherin with a generational seeker. Gryffindor versus Slytherin is no longer a schoolyard rivalry. It is a personal civil war Harry wages against the friends he never made. Hermione's arc deforms quietly. Without the troll rescue, there is no sudden, desperate bond with two reckless Gryffindor boys. She retreats into Ravenclaw-adjacent study circles, orbiting the library with other high achievers who treat rules as lifelines, not suggestions. From that vantage point, Harry becomes a case study, evidence that fame and trauma, placed in the wrong house, can be alchemized into something dangerous. She respects his talent, distrusts his entourage, and files the pattern away. And in the background, the stone plot twists. House loyalty blunts Harry's suspicion of Snape. Why would his own head of house sabotage him? The cloak and dagger glances, the muttered counter-curses at Quidditch, all get misfiled as eccentric protection, not malice. Quirrell, stuttering at the edge of rooms, reads as harmless. We deconstruct a timeline where the boy who once hunted Snape now defends him, and the real threat stands even closer, unchallenged. The divergence is finalized not in a single dramatic choice, but in this slow, structural reprogramming of trust, which raises the question for the rest of the year. When the trapdoor finally opens, who does Harry believe he is walking toward, and who does he think he's saving? The fractured trio, Ron's resentment, Hermione's distance, and a lonely Slytherin. The divergence is finalized in the castle corridors, not the trap door. To see it clearly, we have to leave Harry for a moment. Ron Weasley steps off the boats with the script already written in his head. He will be the boy who befriends the boy who lived. He will go home at Christmas with stories of adventures and shared detentions, proof that destiny finally noticed a Weasley. Instead, he cranes his neck at the sorting and watches the hat shout Slytherin over Harry Potter's head. The applause is wrong, the table is wrong, the image is worse. At the feast, Ron sees Harry laughing at something Draco Malfoy whispers, green and silver scarves already framing the scene. In that instant, admiration undergoes a clean psychological fracture. The hero on the chocolate frog card has chosen the enemy table. The subtext is brutal. If Harry picked them, then what does that say about Ron? Hermione Granger's disappointment arrives more slowly, and crucially, she tries to fight it. In Charms, she raises her hand to correct Harry when he parrots something Draco said about proper families and magic. She cites Hogwarts, a history, outlines the legal definition of Muggle-born, and expects gratitude for the clarification. Instead, the Slytherin row behind Harry snickers. One of them murmurs, "Mudblood swat," just loud enough. Harry flinches. He does not say it, but he does not challenge it either. That silence is what Hermione files away. The core issue is mechanical. In this timeline, every attempt she makes to redirect Harry's assumptions is mediated through a hostile Slytherin chorus. Her answers become their punchlines. By October, she stops turning toward him in class. By Halloween, she has translated her hurt into a tidy category. Harry Potter has chosen popularity over principles, power over accuracy. From the outside, Harry's new reality looks enviable. The Slytherin common room opens for him. Upper years nod in calculated approval. Snape's gaze lingers with something almost protective. Harry enjoys the shield of their prestige, the way doors open when he walks with Malfoy, but the cost leaks in through smaller, quieter channels. Hagrid, who once baked him a lopsided cake and called him "you're a wizard," is cooler now, his eyes flicking to the green on Harry's tie before inviting him in. McGonagall is no longer the stern ally who slips him a biscuit. She is distant, professionally polite, as if bracing for disciplinary paperwork. Passing a staircase, Harry overhears a Gryffindor whisper, "There goes Malfoy's pet," and the phrase lodges under his ribs. Doubt arrives in mundane scenes. A late-night library run for a potions essay becomes a collision with Hermione, quill in hand. Eyes wary, she does not bother with pleasantries. She warns him, flatly, about blood prejudice, about how language shapes reality, about where this dynamic historically leads. Harry mumbles that Draco isn't that bad, hears how weak it sounds, and notices the way her expression closes. On the Quidditch pitch, he watches the Weasley twins choreograph impossible mid-air passes, laughing so hard they nearly fall off their brooms. That is loyalty turned into motion, a structure of trust so embedded they no longer think about it. Harry realizes he has nothing equivalent. Slytherin camaraderie is conditional, transactional, always observing the hierarchy, and then the turning point arrives, not as a duel, but as a joke. Draco proposes a prank on a Muggle-born first year, enchanting the boys' books to scream slurs in the Great Hall. The Slytherin group roars with anticipation. Harry feels every eye slide toward him, waiting to see where the boy who lived lands. This is the moment where we deconstruct a timeline in real time. Does he back Draco and cement his place, or quietly sabotage the spell and risk exposure? He forces a grin, nods once, and says he has an idea to make it even better. He does not yet know which version of himself he is about to protect. And by the next evening, when the enchanted books open, everyone in the hall will see exactly which side Harry Potter has chosen, or thinks he has. Lucius's new investment, power, politics, and the Malfoy-Potter alliance. By the time the last cursed page fades from the air above the house tables, Harry has a new problem. Children have watched him. Adults have taken note. Lucius Malfoy moves. The first Malfoy-Potter family interaction does not happen in a dusty shop or a chaotic rescue mission. It happens in public theater, a Quidditch match, Slytherin versus Gryffindor, with the boy who lived in green. Lucius stands in the VIP box, cane in hand, studying Harry the way a collector studies a rare artifact, assessing condition, provenance, and above all, potential return on investment. Harry dives after the snitch. The stadium roars. Lucius does not cheer. He calculates. A Slytherin Harry is not an obstacle to be undermined. He is a volatile asset. In this altered timeline, the core issue is mechanical. Power is no longer purely external. The legend of the boy who lived has been wired directly into Slytherin's house structure. Lucius can either attack that circuitry or quietly reprogram it. The turning point arrives when Draco, flushed with victory, drags Harry up to the box to meet Father properly. Lucius's smile is thin, courteous, and utterly predatory. He praises Harry's flying, his composure under pressure, his refreshing independence from certain Gryffindor influences. A single compliment is not just flattery, it is a data packet encoded with ideology. From there, the manipulations become concrete. A broom upgrade appears before the next match, sleeker and faster than anything in the school, accompanied by a note about how Slytherin talent deserves Slytherin resources, no matter what Dumbledore thinks. Invitations follow, rarefied pure-blood gatherings in manners where portraits whisper about lineage, where Muggleborns are discussed as abstractions rather than people. At each event, Lucius drops quiet comments about how unfairly Slytherin is treated, how the Ministry prefers Gryffindor theatrics, how Dumbledore's favoritism has warped reality itself. The subtext is brutal. Harry is being offered a narrative in which he is not a bridge between worlds, but a victim of Gryffindor bias, a champion of a besieged elite. Loyalty, in this frame, runs upward, to patrons, to blood, to the Malfoy name. Dumbledore notices. He always does. His response, however, is a pattern interrupt. He does not forbid contact or denounce Lucius. Instead, he becomes warmer in public and more surgical in private. Detentions are reassigned. Harry polishes trophies that memorialize dead Muggleborns, walks with Hagrid to visit the spiders, listens to stories where courage is not about blood, but about who you stand in front of when curses start flying. Each punishment doubles as a moral lesson, a counterspell to Malfoy ideology. We deconstruct a timeline where two elder wizards are no longer distant archetypes, but competing architects of Harry's psychology. Lucius offers prestige, clarity, and a grievance-based identity. Dumbledore offers ambiguity, responsibility, and the burden of choice. Their claim to normalcy is structurally annihilated. Harry's childhood becomes a contested territory. So when whispers about the Philosopher's Stone begin, when corridors fill with rumors of forbidden chambers and three-headed dogs, whose narrative does Harry trust? The man who frames the stone as proof of Dumbledore's reckless favoritism, or the headmaster who hints that some power is not meant to be seized at all? When the battleground shifts from house points to immortality, the question is no longer whether Harry is Slytherin or Gryffindor, it is which father figure he believes. And in the next phase of this fracture, that belief will decide who he is willing to betray. The Stone Heist, rewritten, Slytherin courage, twisted loyalties, that belief decides who he is willing to betray. So when the mystery of the third-floor corridor thickens, Harry's first instinct is not heroic curiosity, it is suspicion. Why, he wonders, would Dumbledore hide a source of immense power behind a Cerberus, in a school under his unilateral control? Draco does not have to work hard to sharpen that question. Over late-night whispers in the Slytherin common room, he reframes the stone as an instrument of house politics, a resource hoarded by a Gryffindor headmaster who has never trusted Slytherin with real authority. The core issue is mechanical. Information in this timeline does not flow through Gryffindor gossip and Ron's panicked speculation. It flows through Lucius's letters, through hints about Gringotts break-ins, through quiet reminders that the Board of Governors is kept in the dark. Harry is not chasing an adventure, he is auditing a power imbalance. The subtext is brutal. If Dumbledore will lie to Slytherin about a Philosopher's Stone, what else is he willing to control? When the heist begins, the trio has been reconfigured. There is no red-haired best friend, no Muggleborn strategist at Harry's elbow. Instead, there is Draco, all sharp confidence and pure-blood entitlement, and Blaise Zabini, who treats the entire operation as a political risk assessment rather than a quest. Fluffy is not a great big dog to be blundered past, he is a security system to be reverse-engineered. Draco leverages Hagrid's loose tongue and a pilfered bottle of fire whiskey to confirm the music weakness, while Blaise calculates the odds of expulsion against the potential leverage of knowing exactly what Dumbledore is hiding. In the Room of Flying Keys, Slytherin traits become survival tools. Harry does not recklessly dive for the first glittering winged shape. He tests patterns, watches flight paths, identifies which key has been clumsily repaired. Draco, on a broom, is precise rather than showy, treating the air as a chessboard of vectors and blind spots. Their loyalty is not to abstract bravery, it is to each other, to the house that finally claimed Harry, and to the promise that knowledge is its own weapon. Then the chessboard appears, and the fracture in the timeline is suddenly personal. In canon, Ron's sacrifice is the emotional fulcrum. Here, no one has that combination of instinct and Gryffindor recklessness. They hesitate. They lose pieces. Harry wins, but only barely, through cautious attrition rather than a grand suicidal move. And when they reach Snape's logic puzzle, the absence is unmistakable. unmistakable. Thick purple flames, neat bottles, riddle on parchment. For the first time, Harry feels the cost of having dismissed the bossy Gryffindor girl in charms. Hermione's off-screen brilliance hangs over the room as a ghost of a better option. The turning point arrives in the final chamber. Quirrell unmasks himself, but his pitch is calibrated to a different boy. He does not merely invoke power and immortality, he invokes lineage. A Slytherin and the boy who lived, he murmurs, presenting Voldemort's presence as an ancestral correction, a chance to restore Slytherin to its rightful dominance over a world Dumbledore has sentimentalized and weakened. This is not a monster offering Harry power, it is a dark mentor offering him a place in an ancient hierarchy. Harry's refusal, therefore, is not a simple Gryffindor no, he has seen what domination looks like at Privet Drive, and he has watched Lucius Malfoy perform a more elegant version of the same control. He understands that Voldemort's offer would not make him free, it would make him another weapon, another abused child who grows up to abuse others. In that moment, Slytherin ambition reroutes. He chooses not to be owned. When he burns Quirrell's skin and the stone vanishes, the divergence is finalized. Slytherin has produced a different kind of hero, one who rejects Voldemort not because he is Slytherin, but because he refuses to let anyone, on any side, define his worth again. The question, as we move forward, is whether that decision holds when the war stops being theoretical and starts bleeding into his own house. Chamber of Secrets. When the air might be your best friend. The war stops being theoretical the night the walls start bleeding. The Chamber of Secrets has been opened. Enemies of the air, beware. The words drip in scarlet across the stone, and in this timeline, every gaze does not scatter across the corridor in confused horror. It pivots, almost mechanically, to a single axis, the emerald-trimmed robes of Slytherin House, then, inevitably, to Harry Potter. What if the boy who lived has become the heir of Slytherin? What if the Sorting Hat's almost choice was not a warning, but a prophecy? In the silence that follows Filch's scream, the answer the school arrives at is simple. He speaks to snakes. He lives in Slytherin's dormitories. The subtext is brutal. Inside the house, the dynamic fractures in a different direction. Draco Malfoy is not afraid. He is exhilarated. In canon, his gloating is theatrical and childish. Here, with Harry as his closest ally and nominal moral compass, the gloating becomes more intimate, more weaponized. He leans over the Slytherin table, eyes bright, and says it where Harry cannot pretend to mishear. Whoever the heir is, he's doing what needed to be done. Mudbloods never should have been here. Harry hears Hermione's laugh in the library. He remembers her hand on his sleeve during first-year flying lessons, explaining Quidditch rules with nervous precision because no one else in Slytherin would. The core issue is mechanical. His loyalty structure has been rewired. The boy who once defined himself against the Dursleys and their hatred now has to decide whether opposing Draco means betraying the only house that ever claimed him. Into that pressure cooker, Lucius Malfoy drops a diary. In the original timeline, the book sinks toward Ginny Weasley, the overlooked girl at the edge of Gryffindor. Here, it circulates through Slytherin hands as contraband prestige, an artifact of real magic from a more glorious age. When it brushes Harry's fingers, Tom Riddle does not present as a distant memory. He frames himself as precedent, a misunderstood Slytherin genius, a boy persecuted by Dumbledore, punished for ambition, for power, for refusing to stay small. This is the pattern interrupt. Harry does not only see a villain, he sees a version of his own file in Dumbledore's desk, annotated in the same suspicious ink. Then, the dueling club shatters the illusion that this is all rumor and graffiti. The snake hits the floor, Justin Finch-Fletchley freezes, and Harry's mouth moves before his mind catches up. Parseltongue spills out, the room recoils. In Gryffindor canon, the reaction is fear and distance. With Slytherin, Harry, it becomes confirmation. The other houses do not merely suspect, they conclude. Their claim to normalcy is structurally annihilated every time he passes in the corridor and conversations die. Ironically, this isolates him further into Slytherin's embrace. Draco doubles down, defending him in public while celebrating the heir in private, a psychological vice that keeps Harry trapped between gratitude and disgust. The turning point arrives when Hermione and Ginny both vanish into the castle's underbelly. The diaries trail, Draco's half-truths, and whispered legends converge at a stretch of damp, unremarkable wall in a flooded bathroom. Harry stands before the entrance to the chamber, the language of snakes buzzing in his throat. If he opens it, he might save them. He will also prove, beyond doubt, that Slytherin's darkest legacy runs through his veins. He draws breath to speak, knowing that whatever word emerges next will decide whether he is Slytherin's savior, its traitor, or its monster. Sirius, Snape, and the shattered narrative of who the villain is. He opens it. The chamber scene confirms what the hat whispered and what Slytherin has already suspected. Harry Potter speaks the language of monsters. By third year, that reality has metastasized into rumor, and rumor has teeth. So when the Daily Prophet announces that Sirius Black has escaped, Slytherin House does not react with fear. They react with vindication. In this timeline, Sirius is not only the traitor who allegedly sold out the Potters, he is held up as Exhibit A in a whispered prosecution of Gryffindor morality. Here, older Slytherins tell a very different story in the common room, that Black was a Gryffindor extremist, the golden boy who proved that reckless courage can end in mass murder, that lions are just snakes who lie about their methods. The subtext is brutal. If a Gryffindor can betray his best friends and blow up a street of muggles, then the entire moral hierarchy of the houses collapses. Harry absorbs this. He does not see Sirius as a tragic fallen hero he never knew. He sees a living reminder that Dumbledore's favorites are capable of the same darkness Slytherin is eternally accused of. Their claim to normalcy is structurally annihilated, and that suits Lucius's quiet narrative just fine. Snape, meanwhile, occupies a far stranger orbit. The core issue is mechanical. As head of Slytherin, he cannot publicly brutalize his own Star Seeker in the way he once needled a Gryffindor upstart. Detention becomes private, clipped, almost surgical. In the classroom and in the common room, his stance toward Harry is controlled, bordering on paternal. He awards points for precise spell work, for strategic thinking, for not rising to bait. To a first year, this would read as favoritism. To a third year, it reads as conditional loyalty. This duality turns poisonous later, because when Harry eventually learns that Snape carried pieces of the prophecy, that Snape's choices helped place his parents in Voldemort's sights, the fracture is not just historical, it is personal. The man who shielded him in corridors also helped construct the night that orphaned him. When we deconstruct a timeline, this is where the emotional geometry becomes almost unbearable. Even the Marauder's map enters Slytherin hands differently. Fred and George still nick it. Draco, however, nicks it from them, half for the challenge, half because Lucius has drilled into him that information is the purest form of power. Harry does not use the map to sneak to Hogsmeade with Ron. That friendship is cooler, more distant, filtered through house rivalry and years of Draco's commentary. Instead, he uses it to assemble a Slytherin strike team, Theo, Daphne, maybe even a reluctant Draco, to track the Gryffindor madman stalking the castle perimeter. The Shrieking Shack, then, is not a private Gryffindor drama. It is a house politics powder keg, wands drawn, green and red ties intermingled, every accusation doubling as propaganda. When the turning point arrives and Sirius proves his innocence, the shock is calibrated differently. Harry is not simply exonerating the stranger he has been told murdered his parents. He is watching the cornerstone of Slytherin's anti-Gryffindor narrative disintegrate in real time. Pettigrew, whimpering on the floor, refuses to align with any house stereotype. No Slytherin cunning, no Gryffindor bravery, just cowardice weaponized into survival. Reality will not cooperate with schoolyard ideology. The pattern interrupt comes in the forest. With the time turner, Harry sees himself and Sirius about to die. He knows what Lucius would advise. Let the state kill its scapegoat, then leverage the fallout. He knows what Dumbledore has modeled. Strategic detachment, the long game, the acceptable loss. Harry does neither. He chooses mercy, for Buckbeak, for Sirius, for a future that cannot pay him back. In that moment, the divergence is finalized. Slytherin has given him tactics, Lucius has given him access, Snape has given him grudging protection, but Harry's decision to act, to save, is a rejection of both Gryffindor's romanticized heroism and Slytherin's ruthless pragmatism. He is building a third option, and the war that follows will have to reckon with it. Prophecy in the Dungeons, Voldemort's Return, with a Slytherin Chosen One. The third task does not begin in the maze. It begins the moment a blue-white flame spits out a fourth name, and the Great Hall realizes the boy who lived has just become the boy who cheated. In this timeline, that accusation lands differently, a Slytherin. Harry stepping forward from the green draped table turns the Triwizard selection into a reputational earthquake. Gryffindor and Hufflepuff see confirmation of every prejudice. Of course, the ambitious Slytherin found a way to game an ancient artifact of magic and power. Slytherin, meanwhile, rises as one. To them, the goblet has simply announced what reality already knew. Their house produces champions. The core issue is mechanical. Canon Harry's selection isolates him from Slytherin. Here, it fuses his identity with the house's public image. Snape cannot openly protect him without confirming the Ministry's suspicions. McGonagall cannot fully defend him without appearing to shield Slytherin favoritism. The institutional structure of Hogwarts itself becomes a pressure cooker, where every sneer from a Gryffindor and every proud clap from a Slytherin reinforces the fracture between Harry the student and Harry the symbol. Lucius Malfoy reads this faster than anyone. In the original timeline, he treats Harry as a dangerous anomaly to be discredited and eventually destroyed. Here, the turning point arrives when he realizes the Ministry's panic can be harnessed. A Slytherin Chosen One is either an existential threat to Voldemort or the most valuable asset he will ever control. Lucius begins to balance two ledgers, his Death Eater loyalty on one side, and the long-term investment of a famous, influenceable ward on the other. What if Voldemort returned not to kill Harry, but to crown him? What if the Dark Lord's regime could parade a Slytherin Harry as proof that pureblood power has destiny on its side? The subtext is brutal. Harry senses the shift. The invitations to Malfoy Manor grow warmer, the advice more strategic, the compliments more pointed. Yet in the gaps Ron would have filled with uncomplicated loyalty, two quieter forces move in. Cedric Diggory and Hermione Granger become his moral anchors. Cedric, fellow champion, refuses to treat Harry as a rival engineered by corruption. His Hufflepuff integrity is painfully consistent. He shares clues, insists on fairness, and, in doing so, offers Harry a model of power wielded without manipulation. Hermione, no longer in his inner circle, but unwilling to ignore him, maintains a wary, almost professional honesty. She will not excuse Slytherin's cruelty, but she will still help him untangle the legalities of the contract, the history of the tournament, the Ministry's fear. Their claim to normalcy is structurally annihilated. Their interactions become a series of high-stakes consultations rather than friendly chats. Then the graveyard. When Voldemort rises, the horror is not only the resurrection, it is the way he speaks to a Slytherin Harry. He does not taunt him as a Gryffindor fool, he welcomes him as a prodigal heir. Voldemort promises to restore Slytherin's honor, to cleanse the House of Weakness, to place Harry at his right hand as proof that the true Slytherin line has triumphed. Harry is forced to reject not just a Dark Lord, but a twisted, weaponized version of his own house's dream. That refusal scars him more deeply than the Cruciatus. It also rewrites the prophecy. By order of the Phoenix, the Ministry's denial is even more vicious, because the symbol is more dangerous. A Slytherin Chosen One, admitting Voldemort has returned, threatens every narrative Cornelius Fudge relies on. Lucius escalates, pushing both the smear campaign and the quiet private offers, protection, resources, a future in which Harry does not have to stand alone. In the Department of Mysteries, when the orb shatters and the prophecy spills out, its wording lands with surgical precision. Neither can live while the other survives. No mention of house, no mention of blood. Fate has never cared that he was Slytherin, only his choices matter. For Harry, this is not abstract philosophy, it is psychological release. He walks out of the Ministry understanding that Slytherin was never the problem was who defined it. That seed is planted in the rubble of the Hall of Prophecy. Slytherin does not have to mean Malfoy, or Voldemort, or the Ministry's caricature. It can mean strategy without cruelty, ambition without supremacy, loyalty without blindness. The divergence is finalized here on a cosmic level. In the war to come, Harry will not just fight for Hogwarts or the wizarding world, he will fight for the soul of his own house. And that raises a final, dangerous question. What happens when Slytherin itself becomes a battlefield? War in Green and Silver. Can Harry redeem Slytherin, or must he abandon it? Slytherin is now the battlefield, but what happens when the war stops being Gryffindor versus the world, and instead becomes a civil war inside Green and Silver itself? The turning point arrives on the Astronomy Tower. Draco Malfoy, wand shaking, stands between Voldemort's orders and Dumbledore's plea. In canon, he is alone with his terror. Here, he is haunted by a counterexample in his own dormitory, Harry Potter, a Slytherin who has spent 5 years proving that ambition does not require cruelty, that power can be weaponized for protection rather than domination. Every time Draco raises his wand, he is not just betraying Dumbledore, he is betraying the boy who dragged him out of the bathroom as Sectum Sempra blood hit the tiles and hissed, "You don't have to become your father." The subtext is brutal. Draco's crisis is no longer abstract morality, it is a psychological fracture between two Slytherin futures. One is carved by Lucius and the Dark Mark. The other is carved by Harry's relentless, infuriating insistence that survival and mercy can coexist. He still cannot kill Dumbledore. But now, when he lowers his wand, it is not only fear, it is a tiny, desperate act of loyalty to the alternative Slytherin Harry has modeled. From there, the Horcrux hunt cannot stay a 3-person camping trip. A Slytherin Harry has been trained to think in structures, in networks, in contingencies. Disappearing with only Ron and Hermione is tactically elegant, but politically disastrous. It abandons the very house he has been trying to redeem, so he fractures the mission. Theodore Knott quietly traces old pureblood genealogies for hidden artifacts. Daphne Greengrass ferries information between neutral families terrified of both sides. Blaise Zabini offers safe houses, not out of altruism, but because betting on Harry has become the most rational long-term investment in the room. The core issue is mechanical. Horcruxes require reach. Gryffindor, Harry relies on trust and improvisation. Slytherin, Harry layers secrecy over a loose Slytherin underground, creating a coalition that is broader, messier, and more vulnerable to betrayal, but exponentially more effective at gathering intelligence. The divergence is finalized when some of those Slytherin contacts feed him locations faster than Dumbledore ever managed. All of this reframes the Malfoys. Lucius's fall from grace is sharper, almost humiliating, because his early investment in Harry, Board of Governors pressure, social sponsorship, careful introductions, has yielded a Slytherin champion for the opposition. Narcissa, meanwhile, has watched for years as Harry shields Draco from detentions, covers for his hesitation, and quietly diverts Snape's worst suspicions. When she lies in the forest and declares Harry dead, it is not a sudden maternal gamble, it is the culmination of a private decision. The boy who protected her son has earned the right to live. By the Battle of Hogwarts, the Great Hall is unrecognizable. Slytherins are not marched out as a monolith. Some flee, some freeze, but a visible, dangerous fraction step forward to stand with Harry. Pansy Parkinson still calls for his surrender. Millicent Bulstrode shoves her back and refuses to move. The wizarding world is forced into a new reality. Cowardice and courage cut through every color on the banners. When Voldemort falls, the legend that survives is not the Gryffindor who defeated him. It is the Slytherin who proved that ambition, cunning, and resourcefulness can serve love instead of fear. House identities are permanently rewritten in the public imagination. Yet one question remains. Hanging over the rebuilt school, can that fragile new Slytherin survive peacetime politics, or will the old prejudices quietly regroup for the next war? Would you take Draco's hand? Lessons from a Slytherin Harry timeline. So we deconstruct a timeline that never breaks the rules of magic, but fractures the social geometry around it. One handshake on a train, one sorting that slides Harry across the hall, one missing golden trio, replaced by a rotating cast of Slytherins, suspicious Ravenclaws, and a Gryffindor redhead, who has to redefine betrayal before he can redefine friendship. Their claim to normalcy is structurally annihilated in small, mechanical ways. Lucius Malfoy does not suddenly become kind, he becomes strategic. Dumbledore does not lose his wariness. He loses his monopoly on mentoring Harry. Each book's climax still arrives. Philosopher's Stone is guarded. A basilisk still wakes. Sirius still escapes. The graveyard ritual still happens. But the angles are different. The core issue is mechanical. Who stands beside Harry when the wand is raised? And which house banner hangs over the fallout? Across that altered structure, one thing refuses to move. Choice. Harry in Green and Silver still feels the psychological pull of power, status, and pureblood approval, yet he also feels the old scar-deep instinct to throw himself between a monster and a weaker target. He can be tempted by the safety of Malfoy influence and the elegance of Lucius's drawing room, and still choose to spare a defeated enemy to shield a Muggleborn, to walk back into danger after every adult tells him to stand down. The turning point arrives not once, but repeatedly. He keeps deciding who he is, under a different set of incentives. This forces an uncomfortable question. If Harry can be recognizably himself in Slytherin, what does that do to our caricature of the house? Ambition, cunning, survival, they are tools, not verdicts. In this reality, those tools protect a frightened first year in a corridor, smuggle information to the Order through Slytherin prefect channels, and sabotage Death Eater logistics under the cover of pureblood etiquette. The same traits could have enforced oppression. Here, they destabilize it from within. Pattern interrupt. Pause and sort him yourself. In this timeline, where would you put this Harry? Still Slytherin, because he learns to weaponize perception and secrecy. Back to Gryffindor, because every major fracture in the war happens when he chooses reckless loyalty over calculated safety, or somewhere else entirely. A psychological hybrid the hat never had language for. Extend the thought experiment. What happens to his Patronus when his happiest memories are not stolen broom rides with Ron, but late-night strategy sessions in the dungeons with Draco, or the first time he outmaneuvers Lucius instead of obeying him? Does the stag remain a stubborn anchor to James, or does it shift into something that better reflects a boy who survives by reading rooms and bending narratives? And the hardest question, could he truly reform Slytherin from within, or does the house reform him more than he reforms it? In your version of this timeline, when the divergence is finalized and the war ends, is Slytherin the banner under which Muggleborns feel safe, or the brand Harry spends the rest of his life apologizing for, while using its networks to quietly fix the world? The subtext is brutal. Somewhere, in some alternate Hogwarts, a Slytherin Harry is still walking down to the dungeons, Draco at his side, the torches throwing green light over stone and ambition. In that reality, when he turns at the bottom of the stairs and scans the corridor, are you standing with him, leveraging cunning and power towards something better, or standing against him, convinced that no amount of choice can redeem the house that claimed him?